Welcome, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Barrett. I'm the Curator of Public Programming here at Roosevelt House. We're here tonight for a screening of Rabble Rousers, followed by a talkback featuring co-director Kelly Anderson and Laura Wolfe Powers. And there will be an opportunity as part of that talkback to ask questions. Following all of that, there'll be a reception upstairs. I don't have much more to add than that. We do hope to hear from Basil, Smikle, between the film and the talkback. So there's that to look forward to as well. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
I was waiting for a post-credit scene. That's the problem with watching too many Marvel movies. In case you don't know who I am, and I'm sure most of you do not, my name is Basil Smikle. I'm the director of the public policy program here at the Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute at Hunter College. Welcome. How many of you have not been here before? That's wonderful. That is it's a good amount. I'm sure there are others here who could give the entire history of this building because we talk about it every time we meet. But just to say that we are in the former home of Franklin and Eleanor and Sarah Roosevelt. The second floor is where the New Deal was sketched out in the library, which is still pretty much the same. And the second floor classroom is where the president-elect before his March inaugural gave his first fireside chat. So we like to say that we think big things in this building. And we love to be able to work with students and faculty members to be able to talk about big issues, big ideas. Bless you. So what I wanted to do was first and foremost thank two of my colleagues, Professors Kelly Anderson, who is a professor and chair of the Film and Media Department here at Hunter, and Professor Laura Wolfe Powers, the associate professor in urban policy and planning. It is Professor Anderson who also is the director, co-director of this film. So you're going to be hearing from them in a moment. But one of the things that I wanted to say before I turn it over to my colleagues, it so happens that I'm teaching my final class tonight, which I'm a little bit late for. And the class is titled Urban Governance. So we talk about Jane Jacobs. We talk about all of the issues, Bloomberg we talked about last week, and we'll be talking about, and de Blasio, and we'll be talking about Eric Adams' view of city governance tonight. But one of the things that struck me about this film is that it brought in two things that I love so much: the history of New York City and activism in this city. I got to see a bit of Bill Tatum, Amsterdam News, which was fantastic. I've become a friend to him and to his daughter over the years, and it was so helpful to me in so many ways. Margarita Lopez, was great to see her in the film, and she is a bright spot in New York City politics. If there was ever an anthology of individuals in our country who have made good trouble, Frances' name better be on that list. It's extraordinary that as there is this conversation about urban renewal, there's also this focus on urban removal. And one of the reasons that that's such an important topic for me today is because we talk about this not just with the students that I'm about to teach tonight, but one of the students in the policy program just yesterday did her presentation, having not seen this film, did her presentation on urban renewal and the Extel towers going up in Chinatown and gentrification and the concern with such an aging population and with such a population of certain income that they are being pushed out of their neighborhoods. So what's extraordinary about this film and about this story and this narrative is that 30, 40, 50 years on, we are still dealing with it in many different ways. And I'll just end with this. As a kid from the Bronx, anybody from the Bronx? We'll talk afterwards. As a kid from the Bronx, I grew up at a time when the Bronx was burning, right? I grew up at a time where there was incredible disinvestment. When I saw the clips of Carter and Reagan going through the neighborhood and being yelled at by neighbors, asking, like, what are you going to do? Like, you can come here and you can do your photo ops, but what actually are you going to do for us? And it's interesting, as I tell that story sometimes, I also remember, and try to remember, that from that, and all those organizations that were doing such great work, Mid-Bronx Desperados, Banana Kelly, and others, that hip-hop came from that. Not just from that space, but from that time and from the ideology of so many of the folks that lived in that community to attach art to their circumstances and look at what that has become. I say that to say because it is really important to understand, and I think the documentary talks about this, but it's something that I try to tell my public policy students all the time, that no matter how we think about and talk about systems oppressing and suppressing ideas and people, that the residents are not passive in their interest in reclaiming their neighborhoods and communities. And I think that really holds true and comes out in this film. So I'm going to go teach my class, and hopefully my students are still there. I think there's a 15-minute grace period. Is there a 15-minute grace period? We always heard that, but I've never tested it. But you are in extraordinarily capable hands. Professors Anderson and Wolf Powers will talk you through the themes, the concepts, the narrative, the creation of this documentary and telling Frances' story. I am very thankful that they could join us here in these hallowed halls this evening. Thank you.
Well, we thought, we could just maybe each ask each other a question and then turn it open to you.
So I'll start. I think it would be interesting for people in the audience to hear a little bit about the origin story of this film, since it is a hunter story. Maybe we could start with that.
Yeah, so I had made a previous film called My Brooklyn, which dealt with the redevelopment of downtown Brooklyn, and that was finished in 2012. And one of the people in it is Tom Angadi, who was a Hunter professor who was in this film. And at one point, Tom taught at Hunter, I taught at Hunter, and somebody we knew said, you guys should teach a class together. And so we were like, okay, maybe we should do that. So we couldn't get permission to team teach a class, so we sort of did it under the radar. We scheduled our classes at the same time and just sort of like put these students together. We had graduate students in urban planning and media students, graduate students making documentaries. And we said, go find stories in New York City neighborhoods, and you have to also be connected to a community organization that's fighting for something. And so I ended up teaching that class with Tom multiple times, and one of the times that the class ran, two students, one from urban planning and one from media, went and found Cooper Square and Fran Goldin. And that's how this film started back in 2000, maybe 10. And so they worked on it, and of course it went way beyond the one semester. They kept going. I mentored them for a while, and then they went on their way. And then they kept working on it, and I kept hearing from them every once in a while, like, well, what's happening with the film? Oh, we're trying to finish it. So over time, they brought on an editor to help them, who's somebody I had worked with on my film. And then about 6 years ago, I said, we have to get this film finished. I will come on and help you finish this film. So this was like, we used to joke that the film for a long time was called It Took 50 Years. And we used to joke and say, this film is going to take 50 years, because nobody had any money. It was very expensive because of all that archival footage. And so it was just, raising money and trying to clear all those clips and find them. And I'll just say the reason I was so committed to this story is that having made a film before about gentrification and displacement and city policy, it's such a depressing topic because there are so few wins. And every time when there would be a Q&A, somebody would inevitably ask, well, who's done this right? Is there anywhere we can look where the people didn't get displaced? And somebody would say, yeah, Cooper Square on the Lower East Side. And we were like, what is this Cooper Square thing? It was sort of like this unicorn story of this one group that managed to actually do this right. And so I just felt it was so important when I learned more about Cooper Square to lift this story up. And of course, Fran is amazing and deserves to have her story told as well. So that's where it came from. So I'm really glad. And I'm so happy to have shown it here. I just realized as I was watching it that there's, FDR's in the film. there's a couple of shots of the American Labor Party, and you see FDR in there, so that's nice too. Yeah. So my question for you is, given that Cooper Square was the pioneer of this community land trust movement, what is its legacy, and did it spark other community land trusts, and sort of what's the situation in the city as far as people trying to use this model to protect affordable housing and just retain some control over their neighborhoods?
So I think that there are now, I believe, 15 land trusts throughout the city of New York. Very few of them own any property, which is the sort of the rub, in the sense that the Cooper Square Land Trust was sort of set in stone during the Dinkins administration in the early 90s, and at that time, the city still owned quite a bit of property, which it had repossessed for non-payment of taxes, and there was a lot of transfer going on both to private landlords and to not-for-profit landlords who renovated the buildings and had certain covenants that meant that they had to keep the housing affordable, and so it was a very opportune time for the people in the land trust to say, this makes sense from a city policy perspective. Since that time, the real estate market has escalated. It continues to escalate, and not simply in Manhattan, but all over the city. So the idea of laying claim to property is quite daunting for land trusts. And I think it's very much, the land trusts that I know about are very much working in the spirit of Cooper Square, and they're trying to do it anyway. Because they're focused on publicly owned land. So there is a group called the Mott Haven Port Morris Community Land Stewards in the South Bronx that has for many years, not as long, not 50 years, but maybe 8 or 10 years, has had its eye on Health and Hospitals Corporation facility that was actually a recovery center it was part of HHS's portfolio, but it actually at one point was a sort of holistic health center that was run by the Young Lords when they were active in New York City. So that group has for many years desired to convert that building, which is empty currently, into a community facility for the arts and for health, that's another potential success story in the sense that the Economic Development Corporation, which is kind of running the process, put out an RFP. The land stewards have, with multiple development partners and so on, have responded to that RFP. And I think that is a city asset that may very well end up under the purview of a land trust. That's one building. There's also the East New York Community Land Trust, which is working very diligently to figure out what the possibilities are to claim some vacant land in their neighborhood, much of which is actually, at this point, parking lots that are owned by the New York City Police Department. And every time there is a question about a publicly owned parcel and how to dispose of it and what to do with it, there are all kinds of existential questions that arise. This land belongs to the public sector for one reason or another, either because the city purchased it at some point, or because the city took it in tax arrears at some point, and so the rallying cry of these various land trusts, and they're in every borough except, I believe, Staten Island at this point. But the rallying cry of these land trusts is public land in public hands. But I think there's a lot of ways to interpret what public means, just in the sense that from the city's perspective, real estate is an asset that can generate revenue that they need to pick up the garbage and provide emergency shelter and run the Department of Consumer Affairs and all the things that the city does with its budget. And so there are real tensions around sort of claims on property and putting it under essentially a different kind of governance structure, which is community-led and controlled by a local group, which is accountable very much to the needs of the surrounding neighborhood. So I think there's a lot of going on in that space right now, and it's a very exciting time. It's also a time of crisis because it's happening at the same time that there is an enormous crisis of affordability, not only from the housing perspective, but also small businesses and industrial firms are experiencing really significant real estate costs that threaten their existence. So there is a bill in the City Council right now, the Community Land Act, that would prioritize community land trusts and other not-for-profit mission-driven organizations when the city is disposing of land that it owns. So there's a lot of energy and activity around trying to get that legislation passed because it would help the cause of these CLTs greatly.
Thank you. Let's see if anyone has any questions about land trust or the film, or yes, in the back. I think we have a microphone. Yes.
Thank you for an excellent documentary. It was quite revealing. And I just had a couple of questions in terms of the actual expenses that were generated. The renovations that occurred during the 1990s, and so $50,000 will probably be twice as much. But I would think just in a renovated apartment that is, you have the old tenement buildings, you would have the tub in the kitchen. Type of situation. So it's a big expenditure, but I could see how it would be difficult to maintain such housing because I would think that Cooper Square was successful because it did get the subsidies, initial capital from the city. And I don't know whether or not the actual operating costs in the community land trust currently actually makes up for the amount of money, amount of capital that's necessary for development. Because that may be a reason why you don't have too many community land trusts, because you would end up happening. What happened is private enterprise that runs based on the market would eventually subsidize the other operations. So anyway, I know based on the movie discussion, you did say that the commercial properties in the community land trust help finance the rest of the building because commercial properties are not subject to rent regulation. So anyway,
Right.
that's a basic question discussion about why the community land trust may be having difficulties because it needs to be subsidized.
Yeah, I don't really know with Cooper Square. Do you, like, whether the maintenance that's collected by the Mutual Housing Association covers the maintenance of the building? I don't know
The members of the MHA actually pay rent, and that is invested into the buildings, along with the commercial rents of the storefronts. And I believe that they're in good financial condition. But as you point out, they didn't have to take out a huge loan because they were getting city subsidy to do the renovations to begin with, right? So if you have more debt, then your operating expenses are just that much more because you're paying your debt service. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge. Where would financing come from to convert units to community ownership and remain affordable, right? So and I know the East Harlem El Barrio Land Trust was featured at the end of the film, and that's a situation where I think it's 3 buildings, and in order to kind of make that quote unquote pencil out in real estate terms, they actually had to do some cross subsidy. So the existing tenants from those buildings are still living there and paying affordable rents for them, but then they also had to bring in some tenants at higher levels of income, and that has an impact on the sort of community building potential of the land trust as well. So there's a lot of complexity.